I like my intro anymore. Hi there, welcome to or welcome back to Tiffany's Books or Read Books, and I talk to you about them. It's a weekly wrap-up. Last week, I actually didn't do a weekly. I did my monthly wrap-up on Tuesday last week. So instead, today, you're going to get everything I've read for the last 12 days of the month. Most of these are audiobooks. I have read one digital book, and I am in the middle of 3 books right now. So we're kind of back on my game a little bit. I'm kind of excited for the things that I've been reading. I decided I was going to knock out some series books, and that's been really productive feeling for me, so it's keeping me going. It's unfortunate that for me to do things, I have to feel like I'm being productive, even when it's things I enjoy, but here we are. So the first 2 books I read this month were Down Among the Sticks and Bones and Beneath the Sugar Sky. I did a review of them that I posted on Friday, so if you want to see a full review, you can check that out. I really liked Down Among the Sticks and Bones a lot. These books are the books 2 and 3 of the Wayward Children series by Seanan McGuire, with the first book being Every Heart a Doorway. In Every Heart a Doorway, we get introduced to the premise where these kids who have not necessarily the best home lives, things they're struggling with, they find a portal, which is a door, just a random door that opens up to them, and it takes them to a world where they're called to. And in some cases, the world fits them. In some cases, as with one of the characters, the world ends up spitting them back out because it's not what they thought. So there's a little bit of kind of flexibility there in what the world does, but in any case, the children are trying to figure out how to cope in the world that they're currently in, and a lot of them have the desire to go back to this other world where they felt safe and secure, or at least happy, if not safe and secure. So Down Among the Sticks and Bones follows 2 characters that we get introduced to in Every Heart a Doorway. It's their backstory, and it really gives us a lot of insight into who they are, and I think it makes the first book so much better, but I wouldn't want to read it before I read the first book. Beneath the Sugar Sky follows characters that were introduced in the first book, as well as some new characters, or a new character. Yeah, some new characters. I'm a little all over the place. It's kind of late, and I wanted to do this earlier. But anyway, that was a little rambly. I have done a full review of it, and you can go check that out. If you don't want to, I do recommend you read these. They're really enjoyable. These are novellas, so they were very short. And for Down Among the Sticks and Bones, Seanan McGuire actually narrates it, and I think that was actually really nice to hear her narrating it. I really enjoyed them. It was a good start to my month. I finished them I finished Down Among the Sticks and Bones, I think, in a day, and then I spread Beneath the Sugar Sky out because it was over a weekend. And I just don't do a lot of audiobook reading over the weekend, typically, unless it's I have a lot of time to spend in the car by myself. But normally, I'm spending time with my boyfriend, and I just don't do audiobooks when I'm doing that. The next novella that I finished was actually finishing off a duology, and that was Mended by Alix E. Harrow. This is the second book in the Fractured Tales, or Fractured Fairy Tales, I can't remember which one, duology, but it's still following the same character. In the first book, we get introduced to Zinnia Gray, and this is a Spindle Splintered. She has a terminal disease that's supposed to kill her on her 21st birthday, and she's kind of, because of that, she's always identified with Sleeping Beauty and becomes a scholar of Sleeping Beauty, actually. So we kind of follow her story as she goes into this Spider-Verse type Sleeping Beauty story. And it's actually I enjoyed it because it was taking control of your story, and it had this really cool kind of portal world thing again. And then Mended follows pretty soon after that, and she's still world hopping and kind of comes to terms with the fact that she needs to go back to the real world. So it's kind of interesting that these 3 books I finished kind of have very similar themes about them, but I did like Mended. I think I might have liked it a little bit better than a Spindle Splintered, but I liked Spindle Splintered as well. I think they're both really good novellas that are fascinating. It's a nice premise. I did a Spindle Splintered physically, and I did a Mended audio. So, and I would recommend them in either way. A Spindle Splintered is cool because it has some old Sleeping Beauty drawings from old books and stuff in it, which I thought was kind of cool. I don't know if Mended does as well, but I like the idea and the premise. These are also both sapphic. And then I finished System Collapse, which is the 7th Murderbot book. So that actually catches me up on the Murderbot series. I have read all of them. I might try and make some notes and do a brief review of it, because I feel as the books go on, it does kind of start to feel fan servicey. And I saw someone else say this recently, and having now finished up the series, I do agree. It starts to feel kind of the fans expect Murderbot to be this way, and so Murderbot is this way. And it's there is a little bit of growth, but it starts to feel kind of repetitive and kind of fan servicey. And I don't know, I don't know if it lost its charm by book 7 for me, but I just didn't really enjoy book 7 that much. There were parts of it I enjoyed. It's really hard to talk about it because it's the 7th book, but Art, which is the Asshole Research Transport, which is introduced in Network Effect, I believe? No, That's the second book with art. This is the third book with art. What is it? Artificial Condition, which is either the second or the third book. I will note it here. Introduces art, and it's not a construct, it's an AI ship, and kind of this tenuous friendship between art and Murderbot. And this is kind of building on that. Murderbot has experienced, again, another trauma, and it is kind of working through it and figuring out what that means, that it can actually experience a trauma that affects its like neural pathways. Which is actually, it's an interesting premise. I think this was closer to a full novel. It was a 7-hour audiobook versus the 4-hour audiobooks they normally are. And I think I just like the 4-hour series type installments versus the longer novels. I think in the longer novels, it starts to just feel more forced, maybe. I still like these, but this was the only one, I think, not the only one, but this is the lowest one for me so far, and I think I just wasn't getting into it. So I may go back and like do rereads in the physical format, maybe. I did just pick up All Systems Red in the physical book because I want these covers before they go away, so now I gotta find the rest of them, now that we're into like the Apple TV covers. I think the new series comes out Friday, but I don't have Apple TV, so I won't be watching it. I'll just be waiting for everyone's commentary on it. I also have a really weird thing where my brain will not let me watch things that are hyped. I have to wait like a few months, otherwise I get in my head about it and I just get a lot of anxiety about it. It's very weird and I don't like it, but I just can't watch things while they're hyped unless I am like watching it with a group of people. Like if I'm on my own, I'm just like anxious about it and it ends up not being a good time, and then I just don't like it because I'm anxious about watching it. It's such a weird my brain does some really horrible things to me sometimes. Anyway, so that is I think it's the weakest installment for me personally. Like I said, I liked some of the things it was doing, but I think just overall the weakest installment for me. And then I finished Frostburned, which is also book 7 of the Mercy Thompson series, which I'm enjoying, and I didn't think I would. This is a paranormal romance kind of urban fantasy mystery thriller thing. I don't really know what you would call it. It is an urban fantasy, but each book kind of has this mystery thriller thing happening. So briefly, the first book is called Moon Called, and it follows Mercy Thompson, who is a shifter. She can shift into a coyote, and she's not quite sure why, but she thinks it has something to do with her native heritage. And I was like, ugh, about that, but I think the author did start working with, according to what my boyfriend has told me, some sensitivity reader type, not quite sensitivity reader, but like she has some collaborators that are helping her deal with the way that she's discussing the different native cultures, and so they get better as you go. But the first one I was like, this feels kind of weird, but I think they get better after that. She's also neighbors with the alpha of the local werewolf pack in the Tri-Cities in Washington, which is pretty close to where I went to university. So I was like, oh, this is set somewhere I'm kind of familiar with, like at least. So she basically ends up falling in love with him, obviously. And as the series goes on, they're like married and they're like together, and she's like the step parent to his teenage daughter, and that part's fine. They have like, it does some weird stuff with like pack bonds and mating bonds, but I don't feel it as forced as some of the other, I haven't read any of like the Neon Fairy books, but it's, from my understanding, it's not as forced as that. This is very much like, if Mercy didn't want to be part of the pack, she wouldn't have to. If she didn't want to have the mating bond, she could fight it. But some of that is because she's immune to magic because of her being a coyote, which is fascinating in the way that happened. So there's some really interesting things. There's still some things that I'm like, oh, that's a little, no, but the series did start in like 2004 or something like that. And the current one that I just finished, I think there's like 20 of these. There's so many of these. But this one was another one where the pack has been kidnapped by maybe government agents. And I was like, oh no, I was reading this to kind of escape reality because they're just kind of silly. And then it was like a government that kidnaps a segment of its own population is leaning dangerously close to, that guy territory. And I was like, oh great, we're doing this. Awesome. But it was fine. It turned out, obviously it works out. But it's interesting the way that we have werewolves, we have fae, we have vampires, we have shifters, we have demigods, we have like all sorts of things that just keep getting added to this series. And I find that kind of fascinating, the way that we're doing it. The fae when we first start the book, the Fae have been out to the public as hello, we exist, we're Fae. And that kind of leads to this whole thing of like Fae having their own reservations and things, and then eventually the werewolves get outed, and the vampires are trying to not be outed, but they're in this book too. So the 3 things that I'm currently reading are, I started Night Guest by this person, I can't remember, and I did not write it down, those are my notes. I did not write it down. I started that because I like to have a book on my Kindle to read at night before I go to bed. I read like 5 pages while I'm like trying to fall asleep and settling in. And it's been kind of nice to have that because that's what I was doing with Frostburned. And so I was like, let me check this out from the library. It's short. I'm 13% in, which is 27 pages. So I'm like, gonna finish it soon. I just haven't been focusing on it, but it's fine. It's one that it doesn't have a lot of like, the reviews are all kind of mid, but I decided to try it for myself anyway because I have seen a couple people who like really liked it and everyone else is kind of mid on it. We're following a woman who is just exhausted all the time, and it's starting to like interfere with her work and her life, and she can't figure out why she's so tired. And so she's at the doctor and they're like, well, have you tried this and have you tried that? And then her friends are like, oh, you just need to do yoga, you need to not eat, you need to eat meat, you need to like eat this, you need to do that. And so she's like trying all these things and she's still exhausted. And so she finally, one of them's like, oh, you should get a step tracker, because if you do 10,000 steps a day, that's healthy and that'll like wear you out, and then you'll be able to sleep, and then you won't wake up tired because you'll actually sleep at night. It's like the thought process is that she's tired because she's not actually sleeping at night, but she says she has no problems falling asleep. So where I'm at, and this is also like the kickoff of the plot too, in the synopsis stuff, she wakes up one morning and she sees she's done like 40,000 steps on the step tracker, and she's like, I had 6,000 when I went to bed. What is this? So that's kind of where we're at, and I believe it has like a supernatural element to it, so there's that. But it's fine so far. It's calm enough in its writing that I'm able to just go to sleep after 5 or 10 pages, which is perfect. That's what I want. Sometimes when I've done this, I've like read like Monstrous I liked because I could read a few pages and then go to sleep, and anyway, beside the point. So then I got peer pressured into, which was not hard to do, into doing a reread of Gideon the Ninth, and I'm 20% into that. I'm reading it physically, a little bit on audio too, because I was just at a point on Saturday where I needed to take the dog for a walk, but I wanted to keep reading, so I popped it on audio, and gave a couple chapters a listen. I'm 20% in, so I just finished Act 1, and I'm obsessed. This is my 4th reread of this book, and I feel like after I finish it, I might read it again. Like, I might go listen to it on audio, because I'm listening to a different book on audio, so like once I finish it physically, I might just like re-listen to the audio again. That's what this book does to me. It's just so good. We're doing it kind of as a buddy read. I gotta figure out when we're gonna do Harrow so I can plan, and that way I can be like, okay, this will be my focus so I can actually get it done. And I think we're probably gonna do it soon based on the way the group chat is going, because we now kind of want to get to Nona, because we're like, I think that's talked about in Nona, and so now we're like, Nona, so, which is the only one that I haven't reread. I've read Harrow twice. I've read Gideon 3 times, Harrow twice, and Nona once, so I needed to do a reread of Nona. But I'm doing a short reels kind of recap of each chapter, with like some extra details of stuff. I'm not posting them every single day, but if you want to see those, they're over on my Instagram, and I probably will put together a video when I finish it. That thing I started like a year ago and never finished, I might actually like sit down and do it, because I've been taking better notes this time. This is the 4th time I've read it. At this point, it should be like in my brain. But there's things I keep like rediscovering or discovering for new as I'm reading it, which I'm enjoying. And then the last thing is I am listening to The Faithless by C.L. Clarke, which is book 2 in, I think it's called The Magic of the Lost. The first book is The Unbroken, and it follows Turaine and Luca, and Turaine is a conscripted soldier who was kidnapped from her homeworld of Kozali. That's probably like not the exact way to say it, but that's how the audiobook says it, because it has a French accent on it, or Kozal. They are Kozali. Kozal is the country. Anyway, this is kind of inspired by the French occupation of North Africa. It's a flintlock fantasy. And Turaine was basically, in the first book, she was imprisoned for treason, and she was like set free or collected by Luca. Luca was like, I want her as my personal bodyguard. And since Luca is the princess of Belladere, I don't know, man, I can't say things because there's a French accent on them in the audiobook, which is really good and helpful. I just can't repeat it the correct way, and I have no idea how it's spelled, so I can't even say it like incorrectly. Anyway, so that kind of kicks off this whole thing in order for Turain's home country to get freedom, to become sovereign, because she's actually currently in her home country for the first time as an adult. She was taken as a child, and it kicks off this whole thing, and we're continuing the process in book 2 of their country trying to become sovereign, and they have sent Turain to Belvedere as an ambassador, and now there's been like a murder, and she's like swept up in the middle of it while trying to protect herself and still like learn how to behave in court. It's very interesting. I'm really enjoying it. I'm like 42% into it, and I am like very much like, okay, I will probably be like devouring this in the next couple days, because I'm at that point now where I'm not going to want to put it down instead of just listening for an hour in the car. I'm going to be like listening for an hour in the car, putting in my headphones, listening while I'm at work, listening while I walk the dog. Like, I'm going to be finishing it much more quickly now because things are really starting to happen. It is kind of slow, but I do really like it. The 3rd book is supposed to come out in September or October of this year, so I'm looking forward to that, but that will get me caught up on this series. That's where I'm at. Hopefully I'll finish Gideon in the next couple days. I was hoping to do some reading tonight, but it's just gotten so late so quick that I don't know if I'm really going to have time. So that's kind of where we're at. So far I'm learning that if I put an audio TBR, I will stick to it, which is pretty good. So at least an audio, so I can at least start making audio TBRs every month, which I'm actually kind of excited about, because that means I can get a plan of like, what do I want to read on audio? And I can just borrow it from Libby, get it set up, and have an audio TBR planned, which I'm excited about. So let me know your thoughts on any of these things, and I will talk to you soon with something else.